Very disturbing news coming in from the United States. Controversial author Salman Rushdie was attacked as he was about to give a lecture in New York City. A reporter, in fact, witnessed a man storm on the stage. When the author was about to begin his lecture, he began punching or stabbing Rushdie as he was being introduced. The author fell to the floor and the attacker has been detained by the police. He was airlifted to the hospital where he is currently receiving treatment. Remember, Salman Rushdie has been in news for his controversial book, particularly the Satanic Verses, which is banned in Iran since 1988, as it was alleged to be blasphemous towards Islam. There has been also a bounty on him by the Iranian top leader since 1980s, though in 1998 the Iranian government had said that it wasn't really seeking to enforce the fatwa. So what exactly is the reason for this attack? Is that fatwa and this attack linked? That is something that is subject of investigation. Remember, his first novel came out in 1975, but one of his seminal works is about modern India, which is The Midnight's Children, in 1981, which won him also the Booker Prize. After the controversy over his fourth book, that is The Satanic Verses, he has been largely out of the public eye, but despite the threats, he brought several novels throughout the 1990s. Salman Rushdie in 2012 had said that he would rather be away from all the public eye because there was this entire bounty on him. So now, what exactly is the nature of investigation? What do we know now? Abhishek Jha tracks External Affairs Ministry for us. Abhishek, what are you picking up particularly from the cops on ground?
Maria, clearly this is an attack which was least expected on a 75-year-old man who has been in and out of public glare because of his the controversies around his writing. As you have also discussed about the Satanic Verses, how he was an eyesore for this Islamic ruling and the top leaders of Islam, the government in Iran for a very long time. In fact, he had to live in hiding for a very long time because of those fatwas and those threats on his life. But for a very long time now, those threats were out. In fact, some years ago, in a very gesture manner, Salman Rushdie has himself said that maybe those people nobody is interested in taking those bounty that were actually announced on him. So probably in last few years there was no such major threat on his life. So he was also pretty relaxed in his public appearances and normal routine life or literal works. So this has come just out of the blue when he was about to deliver his lecture. People were gathered in that amphitheater in a large number. But suddenly this person who is now under police custody, he walked onto the stage, he punched him and he stabbed him also. Apparently, now the New York police has released a statement which says that Rushdie has apparently received a stab injury on his neck. So clearly the motive of this attacker was to kill him. He was not there to just make a scene or just show some message. He was clearly very mindfully going there and attacking him in order to kill him or eliminate him. But still, this is the preliminary reports that we are receiving. But now he has been lifted by a helicopter to a nearby hospital. He's being treated. Exact medical condition of Salman Rushdie is still unknown.
Let me bring in Ray Locker now. He's a senior journalist and also a national security expert, joining me from Utah in US. What do we know about this attack, Ray? Particularly to do with the identity of the attacker and what is the motive behind this?
Well, I don't know the identity of the attacker, and I would imagine the motive was somehow tied to the fatwa that was placed on Rushdie in the late 80s by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini of Iran. That has kind of faded away, and Rushdie has been out in public, but it still is in effect, and it's up to some crazy person to decide to act on it.
So is it just one lone ranger without any motive, or do you think, because I'm looking at the statement that has been released by New York State Police, they are confirming the stabbing now, and they are saying that the person has been taken into custody. That is, the attacker has been taken into custody, and Salman Rushdie has been taken to an area hospital by helicopter. Do we know more about the nature of this attack?
Other than he was, sitting on the stage about ready to speak, and the guy rushed up and stabbed him in the neck. And as your previous speaker said, obviously intended to kill him. You don't stab somebody in the neck if you're not trying to kill somebody. And I just hope that he turns out to get well from this. That's a very serious attack.
Yes, and he has been living in New York City for the last 20 years. Of course, he is now a British passport holder, someone who is of Indian origin. But is this linked to the fatwa against him? Because his controversial book, Satanic Verses, actually made several in Iran announce a bounty on him.
I can only imagine that it's related to the fatwa. He's written a number of novels and other books since then, and some that have stirred up controversy in certain circles, but nothing that has raised the ire that the Satanic Verses did. So that's my suspicion that it's tied to that, but we don't know yet for sure. Once we identify the assailant, figure out a little bit more about him, we'll probably know more.
Okay, let me connect back to Abhishek Jha. Abhishek Jha, what do we know about the attacker?
So far, there has not been any report or any clarity on the attacker. We know that he was immediately nabbed because there was one security personnel who was present on the event. In fact, the attacker during this whole scuffle process, Salman Rushdie, did get a serious injury. But the interviewer who was on the stage, he also got a head injury. The security person who was present on the event, he nabbed the attacker. The amphitheater was full of people, so there was hardly any chance for him to run away from the scene. He was immediately handed over to the police, and now he is under the custody and interrogation is on. We don't know exactly who all were behind it. In fact, if more than one people were involved in this attack, whether it was an attack well planned and in an organized setup was working behind it, or it was just a person who had some grudge against Salman Rushdie and he went berserk and attacked him with an intent to kill him. So we'll have to wait maybe for a few hours before the New York police will come out with some statement and the clarity will be on the issue.
Okay, so what we do know right now is that the attack happened at about 11 a.m. US time, and Mr. Rushdie took the stage to deliver a lecture at this Chautauqua institution, which is a community in Western New York that offers arts and literary programming during the summer. And Mr. Rushdie has been attacked and stabbed in the neck is now what is being confirmed, and he was on stage, and this institution is near Erie in Western New York. CNN is in fact reporting on this story. Let's cut across to it.
Trita Parsi, the author of Losing an Enemy and executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, joins us live now. Thank you so much for being with us. I really want to make it clear that we still don't know specifically what the motive may have been today. However, just give us a bit more color about some of the controversies that Salman Rushdie has been embroiled in from a literary perspective. I'm talking specifically about the Satanic Verses, which were published in 1988. And of course, the Ayatollah of Iran at the time issued a fatwa against him, roughly around a $3 million or so reward for anybody who successfully killed him. This was, though, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago now. And for the longest time, Salman Rushdie had police protection. Just explain to our audience the context here and why what happened today is especially significant given his writings in the past.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. In 1988, he publishes the book Satanic Verses that initially was only causing a controversy in Britain itself and in India, his ancestral home. Later on, the Iranian Ayatollah Khomeini saw an opportunity to essentially hijack the issue and elevate it and significantly escalate by issuing a fatwa, which of course created massive problems internationally. The Iranian state at the time said that they would be.
And in fact, New York Governor Kathleen Hochul has now tweeted, and she is saying, thank you to the swift response of New York State Police and first responders following today's attack of author Salman Rushdie. Our thoughts are with Salman and his loved ones following this horrific event. I have directed state police to further assist however needed in this investigation. As we have been saying, this is a developing story. We are yet to get details of what the condition of Salman Rushdie is. We do not know about it, and we do not also know much about the attacker, his identity, and also the motive. One story we'll continue to track very, very closely, shifting focus here on the big debate on News Epicenter now. There seems to be no end to the war over freebies between the centre and opposition states. The bitter fight took off last month after Prime Minister Narendra Modi cautioned people against what he called the reverie culture of offering freebies for garnering votes and called it very dangerous for the development of the country. Aadmi Party, on the other hand, has been defending the policy and has been calling promises to provide affordable healthcare and free electricity as welfarism. This face-off escalated at the beginning of the week when Aadmi Party filed an application in the Apex Court asking it to intervene in the PIL filed by lawyer Ashwini Upadhyay against quote-unquote freebies. Aadmi Party in the court put forth the welfarism argument and said the schemes for the socio-economic upliftment of the deserving and disadvantaged masses cannot be described as freebies. The centre has now proposed a committee to be formed in the matter, which should have secretaries from the central government, state governments, representatives from various political parties, the RBI, Finance Commission, Taxpayers Association and freebies supporters as well. The debate over freebies versus development expenditure reflects a primary problem: the relationship between unlimited wants and limited means that have alternative uses. As a taxpayer, as a voter, we lose out when politicians hand saris, laptops, cash and the likes to win electoral favor. These SOPs often come with a hidden cost of reckless spending, and the result is a government that is short on funds to invest in things that in fact improves the lives and ensures sustainability. So, what exactly is that thin line between freebies and welfare policies? And are these SOPs all about votes and nothing to do with improving livelihoods of people? To decode this, I will be joined by two eminent economists. Joining me now is the first Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog and Professor of Economics at Columbia University, Arvind Kejriwal. And later on the show, we'll hear from Executive Director of India at the IMF, Surjit Bhalla. Dr. Arvind Kejriwal, really appreciate your time, sir. How do we distinguish between subsidies, which are seen as welfarism, from freebies? On one hand, the support to education, health, farms are good subsidies, but on the other hand, what is said is that free electricity is really not a subsidy, because not every farmer or every household actually needs free electricity.
It's a difficult one, Maria, because, the distortions can come from what is seen as welfarism, as well as from what is not seen as welfarism. To some degree, of course, one person's welfarism is another person's freebie. So it is difficult. So economists tend to, think in terms of efficiency effects. Subsidies that have very large distorting effects in terms of efficiency of the economy, those we generally try to discourage. And if you wish, you can call them freebies. So clearly, for example, something like a fertilizer subsidy electricity subsidy, when it is given particularly to households that are well-to-do, would both be, in my view, kind of distorting subsidies which don't necessarily serve a social purpose. So distorting subsidies, we can generally economists are okay when they're serving some sort of welfare redistribution objective. Now, when you think of subsidy, let's say electricity subsidy to all households, it's not quite clearly a kind of redistribution you would want to do. You would rather use the subsidy that is going well-to-do households to the poorer households, even if it happens to be not for electricity.
Yes.
MSP is similarly MSP has also a very similar problem because a lot of it ends up going, really actually the bulk of the subsidy, both on fertilizer and MSP, ends up going to the richer farmers, right? Because who gets the bulk of both fertilizer and MSP subsidy? It's the large landowners,
Right.
and therefore these are the well-to-do farmers, not the ones, those who are farming very tiny little farms. In fact, if you think of the small farms, half of our holdings are less than half hectare. They have no surplus to sell on the market, and therefore they get no subsidy on the MSP because they're not even bringing their produce to the APMC or the Mandi.
Okay.
And same, how much fertilizer we use on a half-acre or half-hectare farm. So, complicated question, requires a little deeper thinking. But politically, in any case, the subsidies are there.
Yes, you said it rightly. This is in the realm of politics. But of course, economists such as you are weighing in on it as well. Will it be a simplistic view to say that freebies are almost like bribes to win votes? But the other argument then is that those living on the margins of society actually depend on these freebies. They need those freebies and they need that kind of food security or social security.
Yeah, you see, so ultimately, look, in a democracy, it's difficult to eliminate the freebies. I think the debate is very good. I'm glad in that sense that the Chief Justice of India has triggered this debate because that will help us probably at least on the margins reduce some of the subsidies that are distortionary and that really don't serve the kind of purpose you have in mind, which transfers to they need them for what there's absolutely no doubt. In fact, they need more than what we currently are able to afford because of the fiscal constraints. And that, of course, makes all the more reason why, subsidies that are distortionary, that are actually going to the well-to-do, should in fact be reduced and therefore diverted to the poor. So that case certainly exists. But when it comes to elections, I think everybody is doing their sense, and we can argue about so these are okay, these are not okay. But in a democratic society, that's something that is there to stay.
All right, Professor Panagia, today we heard a lot of argument, in fact, happened between the BJP and the Aam Aadmi Party over loan waiver and loan written off. What exactly is the difference between the two?
So the way I understand it is, when we say loan waivers, we are referring to, I suspect, that during elections or prior to elections, parties sort of offering to waive the loans. I think largely those are the loan waivers. That's what you're referring to. I think those are detrimental in a bigger way, which is that you are basically hurting those who are actually paying their loans. So when you waive the loan, those who were actually already paying their loans feel that, goodness, why were we paying them? And so in some degree, sort of end up punishing those who live within their means. When they borrow, they try to pay them. Whereas those who are delinquents who choose not to pay are the ones who benefit from the waiver. Whereas loan write-offs can have many different forms, and commonly remember that the banks have to write off loans when effectively a business to which they gave the money to which the credit was given fails. If that business fails in the end, you have no choice. I mean, that's the risk of lending money. And in every system, every economy, a small part of the loans does go bad, and they have to be then written off. So if that is how the write-off of loans is interpreted, then that's perfectly good expenditure of doing business. I think that's a cost of doing business for the banks or for lenders in general.
Okay.
So if I can make that distinction, then clearly the loan waivers are a far worse thing to do. And in any case, loan write-offs in the way I have described them are absolutely legitimate instrument of policy. I mean, not even policy, but it's just something that, to keep any system of intermediate life alive, you wouldn't.
Okay, Professor Panagia, another argument is also this, that why punish the poor when crores are in fact waived off by writing off loans of super rich? There is this argument about custom duty, for example. So why not look at the most vulnerable differently from those who belong to the rich category or well-to-do?
No, absolutely. I mean, no argument about that, Maria. I mean, we got to do that. We tend to do that, but one is being driven by the social welfarism, right? I mean, the distributions or whatever expenditures we do on the poor and the vulnerable, those are being driven precisely by the social consensus that the society, as it grows and becomes richer, it has got to take care of these sections of society, and so those transfers expenditures are all very well justified. Whereas these other ones actually get driven by lobbying, by corruption and whatnot. And so they really become a function of the governance, how the government of the day is administering its laws, administering its programs and all. And governments that, want to lobby for accepting corruption and even indulging in corruption, they will create these problems. They would then squander the funds, and the redistribution will happen to the non-deserving. I mean, custom duty, for example, is to me, actually, as an economist, is a good example. What you're doing here, you basically are taking it out of the pocket of the consumer and giving it to the producer, right? Think of automobile. Why should you have to pay? Why should you, that is, as a buyer of an automobile, have to pay 1.5 times the price that I pay for the exactly same automobile here in the United States? Because there is a 100% custom duty on these cars, so therefore it allows the domestic manufacturers to jack up the price, and that to me is a freebie. Actually, the producer being given at the expense of the consumer. That's just not justified. How is that justified? There are many of these policy measures that we have introduced along the way. So that, populism in policy, right? Things like Land Acquisition Act. It was just as subsidies are given out of populism or to votes. This legislation was brought in that way that made the cost of the public projects so much higher. Today, even a linear project like road construction, now 3/4 the cost is not building the road, it's to acquire the land. And that has all sorts of perverse effects. The moment people find out the road is going to be built through a particular region, mafias move in to actually buy off that land from the actual owners in advance, so that they can then get the very high price that the Acquisition Act actually requires the government to pay. So, these are unfortunate kind of policies that get adopted.
Okay.
They seem to be popular at the time they are put in place, but ultimately the cost is paid by the taxpayer.
Yes. My last question to you, Professor Panagia. Are you for freebies or not for freebies? And how do you actually look at this link that is there of freebies and welfarism?
I mean, look, the term that one uses, what is a freebie and what is not a freebie. I mean, if we are, let's say, talking about any transfer, then of course there are many legitimate transfers, many legitimate transfers. And we have talked about these, the transfers, let's say, to the poor that you do under PM Kisan, or some of the transfers, at least under Food Security Act, selling you the food grain at prices of 1 to 3 rupees per kilogram, depending on which grain it is. And at least to the extent that it is going to the very poor who can't afford 2 meals a day otherwise, perfectly legitimate transfer. But then, a lot of other things slip in, meaning that, we are covering almost 2/3 of the population under the Food Security Act. That's a bit much. Fertilizer subsidy we talked about, there is also a freebie, but it is going largely to the rich. MSP, largely going to the rich. Freebie definition is simply something that you get without having to pay for it. And a lot of these freebies are very sensible policies. Any democratic government will absolutely have the obligation to actually, give those freebies. But then there are a lot of others which are going to the non-deserving. Those, I think, we should try to minimize.
All right.
By the way, one good example of this is the LPG subsidy. Right, LPG subsidy was going to the well-to-do households, and the Prime Minister actually did try to eliminate that. That was a good example of a freebie being eliminated because it was going to the undeserving. He first started off with the "Give It Up" campaign, so he tried to do it first by persuasion, and then gradually tried to phase it out. So that is a good example of a freebie which was going to the undeserving, having been eliminated.
All right. Professor Panagri, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much. Let me bring in my political guest, because this is actually being debated more in the political space. Shehzad Poonawalla, spokesperson of the BJP, joining me here in the studio. Avni Bansal, representing the Congress. We have Akshay Marathe of Aam Aadmi Party. Shehzad, why is your subsidy, welfarism, and that of your political opponents freebies or reveries?
Simply because a welfare scheme transforms the lives of the targeted audience, which is a marginalized section, whereas a reverie is a lollipop which never gets delivered on the ground and is only a marketing gimmick for getting votes. Let me give you some concrete examples. They keep citing that their revenue has gone up. Let me tell you the truth about Delhi government's revenue. Delhi was always a revenue surplus state. In fact, the revenue surplus levels have fallen from 88% from Sheila Dikshit's time to now, and their debt has gone up by 7% in the last 4 years. And the very reason that Delhi even sustains itself is because the pension liabilities and Delhi police is taken care of by the central government. But having said that, let me tell you about schools. Today there's a story on CNN News 18 that out of the 89 applicants for loans from the higher education, only 2 were granted these loans, and 19 crore was spent on this particular year's advertisement. And as far as schools are concerned, and I hope my dear friend Akshay Marathe has got his facts, they were going to build 500 new schools and 20 new colleges where free education could be given. By the way, they opened up 850 thekas, but can Mr. Akshay Marathe right now give me 20 new schools names that they've opened in the last 8 years? Because they say that we are providing free Shiksha through this. 700 schools don't have principals, 400 schools don't have vice principals, 40,000 teaching posts are empty, 22,000 guest teachers were removed. By the way, there was also corruption that was done in the construction of these classrooms, which they say we've constructed a lot of classrooms. 5 lakh classrooms was, the cost was actually escalated to 28 lakhs. And also the level of the education has gone down in Delhi, and 40,000 EWS seats have not been filled. So this is the reality of their so-called free Shiksha. When you come to free water, 30% only of Delhi has pipelines of water. The remaining had to be serviced by the Tanka Mafia. And by the way, the CAG report has said that Delhi Jal Board is in loss, and it's for the last 5 years they've not returned a single rupee of loans.
Akshay,
so this is the
reality.
Let's
have a constructive debate. Here is a BJP talking about your freebie, first electricity and then education, and saying that there are problems in both of these. Respond on facts, pointers पे जवाब देना है.
Maria, first of all, I want to say that in the last 2 years of the pandemic, 2 lakh children from Delhi's private schools have moved to Delhi's government schools. In Gujarat, on the other hand, is run by the BJP. 4 lakh children who used to study in government schools have had to move out to private schools. So in that lies the proof of the pudding that the people of Delhi, the parents of Delhi, the children of Delhi have given a thumbs up to the quality of Delhi's government schools. And this is something that many channels, even your channel, can go out today, go to a Delhi.
Can you name 10 schools that you built where these needs were being serviced?
Shehzad, I didn't interrupt
No,
you.
one second.
Shehzad,
I am acknowledging
Shehzad, the
this.
opening comments.
Maria, I
Yes.
need the names of the 10
Yes.
schools that they built in the last 8 years. 10
Shehzad,
new schools.
Shehzad, let
10
me
new
speak.
schools, tell
Yes.
me the names.
Yes, okay. Akshay, go ahead.
Shehzad,
Yes.
I didn't interrupt you.
Yes,
Now let
Akshay,
me
go
finish.
ahead.
Tell me
Yeah.
the names of the schools.
Now,
The
this
rest
Akshay,
you can
speak.
put on
To do with
YouTube or your
education.
advertisement in,
Yes.
in various channels. Tell me the names of the schools.
Let's get to the crux of this debate.
No, let's
We
get
are a
the names
party,
of the
Aadmi
schools.
Party, which is a party which believes we have to invest
Names
in
of
our
the
people.
schools.
We have to invest in their education, in health, in water, in power,
Names
in
of the
transportation.
schools.
So we provide these services for free and high quality services because we
Names.
think these are the building blocks of any modern government, any modern country, including America, Europe. All of these advanced
have 10
nations provide
schools
these
names?
services to their people for free. The BJP, on the other hand, has become a party that provides loans to their rich friends and refuses to recover those loans. Now, let me give you an example.
Can you tell me
lakh
the names
crore
of the
rupees
schools?
worth of loans have been written off in the last 8 years by the BJP government, provided to their best rich friends. And today, they are saying they don't have money to provide services for free to the people of India who have voted them to power. I want to ask Mr. Poonawala, why is it that the BJP doesn't have money to give services for free to the people of this country, but it has the money to give loans from our pocket to their rich friends, but is refusing to recover those loans?
Okay.
So Mr. Poonawala should answer this
Let me
question.
answer this
that
very
what is
factually
their,
because
why
we're
is it
debating
that
only on
their
facts,
government
Maria.
refuses to recover these loans, but it's
Okay.
questioning Arvind
I will
Kejriwal.
prove
Akshay,
Mr.
first,
Abarathe
Akshay,
wrong.
first, you did not respond to the point being made about naming schools. You should have named those schools. And now, Shehzad, respond to the
Specifically on
question that
this.
yes, 1 point.
Maria,
Yes.
you've been covering politics for, I think, at least 10, 12, 15 years now. A loan written off is different from a loan waived off. A written off
Yes,
loan
in
does
fact,
not...
I asked that
one
question
second.
to Professor
Exactly.
Panazlia, yes.
Yes. Now, here's the news report. In the last 8 years, 8.6 lakh rupee loans have been recovered. Because when you write off a loan, it doesn't mean it's loan maafi. It's unfortunate that Akshay Marathe, who can't name 10 new schools that his government has built in the last 5 years, or 5 new colleges, or 5 new hospitals, is saying loans written off are loans waived off.
Okay.
The loans written off is an accounting term that means
Akshay,
that those loans are still going to be returned.
Because the
Here
problem
it
is that this debate is no longer constructive debate that's happening between the Aam Aadmi Party, the BJP and the
Because
Congress.
one
It
is
has
debating
become
on
about
figment of
point
imagination,
scoring.
not on facts.
It has become about point
Maria,
scoring.
can I-
Akshay.
it is
No, one
Yes.
second.
Akshay, no, Akshay,
Who's
Akshay,
lying?
now. One
Who's
moment.
lying? When they
Akshay.
say loan maafi, is it a loan
Shehzad, you have
maafi?
made your point, Akshay.
I want to read from a parliament answer given by the finance minister of this country.
I
to,
know what that is.
the
Written
leader
off is
of
not
opposition.
waived.
Sir, Shehzad, let's be
Please
nice
read
to each
that.
other.
Please read it.
Okay.
Read it.
Let's respect each other.
Yes.
Read it.
Yes.
Let me read it out.
Yes, read it.
It says that bank-wise details of amounts of loans written off by PSPs.
Do you know what the meaning of written off is?
86. Let me finish my point.
What is the
Shehzad.
meaning of written off? I know
86,000
it's written off. We are not saying anything new.
86,000.
Please explain to him
Shehzad,
what is
No,
written
no, let
off.
him
Shehzad,
speak.
if you
Let him
if
speak,
you
yes.
If you can talk without interruption, you should let me also talk.
Yes.
Let's be nice.
Okay,
you know,
go
it's
ahead.
not nice.
Go ahead.
You are lying.
86,000
Written off does
Okay.
not mean waiver.
86,968.
Huh.
My goodness, I'm saying 86,000. I'm giving you credit, Shehzad. I'm saying 86,000 crore rupees have been recovered by your government.
8.6
But
lakh
that
crores
is-
have been recovered.
No, I have the parliament answer for you.
You may
I
have the
can share
parliament
it with
answer,
you.
I have the RBI document. I don't know which answer you're talking
No.
about. You
Let's
lied
not-
about the
let's not get into- let's
pension
not get into- no,
commission
let's-
also.
No,
You
no,
lied
one
about
second,
the
one
8
second.
pension commission.
The question
Kejriwal
is,
lied about
the question
it.
is,
He
the
lied
10 lakh
about it
crore
on
rupee
television.
loans that you have written off need to be recovered, which you have not done. So tell us, give us
You
a
have
date,
to
Shehzad,
be-
by which date?
First of all,
By
it's
which
written
date
off.
Okay,
will
since
you
Avani
recover those
Bansal
loans?
hasn't come into this
By
debate,
which
and let me
date?
bring
Let's
her as
hear
well.
this.
No,
I
one
think it's
moment.
necessary
I
for
have
the
to
audiences to be clear.
bring
Is
Avani
written
Bansal
off
as well.
waived off?
Okay.
is written or waived off.
Avani Bansal,
Maria,
Avani
is written or
Bansal,
waived
Avani
off?
Bansal,
Is written or waived off?
why is it that this is about point scoring? There is something horribly going wrong in this debate. There should be a debate on freebie, but why is it only about Congress ne ye kiya, BJP ne ye nahi kiya? Larger issue pe kyun nahi discussion ho raha hai? That's what is the need of the hour.
Yes, thank you so much. On the issue of freebies, I'm entirely with you. This is a larger debate. This is a question about free and fair elections. The first point I want to make, and just go away from this entire debate that these two have been having, to a larger point. See, the Supreme Court in its direction asked the Election Commission of India to be part of an expert committee and suggest what should be the way, how should we regulate this, because we clearly cannot deregister the parties. The first thing to my mind, which is baffling, is that the Election Commission of India said, since there is going to be government personnel and government bodies on this expert committee, we don't want to be a part of it, and we can't regulate. It is the policy of every political party. I don't think that's the best stand. I think Election Commission of India has a constitutional duty to ensure free and fair elections. That's what Congress stands for, and we think every person, every stakeholder needs to be a part of this debate. That's my first opening point. Now the second question, Shehzad has been going on about this difference between waive off and writing off. Let me explain to you. In the last 5 years, only 14% money that was written off has actually been recovered, which means we're still talking of a loss of about 6 lakh crores. I have two specific questions for Shehzad Poonawalla. The first question is, as per May 2022, about 3.07 crore families are asking for Manrega because they're saying we don't have employment. The situation of unemployment has hit so bad in this country. And still, the amount that the government is allocated for Manrega scheme has been declined from the previous years. When you have 3.07 crore families asking for 100 days of employment under Manrega scheme, why is that? One second. Let me just give me 30 seconds to complete my point. The second point is that he's been talking about, corporate tax and, why are they letting the rich go off the hook? The simple statistic on this is that there is rupees 1.84 lakh crore that has been cost to the public exchequer simply because you have slashed corporate tax. So my larger point on freebies is this. We have to ask ourselves, who are these freebies for? Where is the money coming from? To my mind, both the Aadmi Party and the BJP do not understand economics. They're all about populism. They say one thing, they do entirely another, and they are definitely not with the larger masses of this country.
Okay, now let me answer on facts. Let me please answer on facts. May I please answer on facts? Maria, may I please answer on facts? Maria, may I please answer on facts?
Go ahead.
She needs to stop speaking so I can answer and one person can be heard. First of all, on Manrega, Maria, on Manrega, my voice won't be heard if she keeps speaking.
Yes, you have asked two questions. Avani, you have asked two questions. Okay. Avani, you have asked two questions. Let him respond.
Maria, first of all, those, including Mr. Raghuram Rajan, who acknowledged that the loans given between Maria, now this has to stop.
Okay. Yes. You're getting, yes. He is responding to that specific question. Yes, go ahead.
Maria, first of all, Raghuram Rajan acknowledged that the loans given between 2008 to 14 were the majority of the loans that turned into NPAs. In fact, 1.32% between 2013 to 14, the outgoings of the PSB banks turned into bad loans and NPAs. That percentage has now come down to, Maria, she has to stop talking in the middle or else the audience does not hear. I go back and I hear these debates, it's unaudible.
Avani, you have asked two questions, let him respond.
I am answering on facts, she can't interrupt me.
Okay, go ahead, respond, yes, go ahead.
Only 40.
I am answering, can she please stop speaking, Maria, you need to protect my time.
Okay.
Simple question, yes or no? Only 14% money has been recovered.
Avani, there is nothing yes and no. There is no response in yes and no. That is not the way debates happen. Go ahead, Shehzad.
No, it's wrong. You're lying. No, you're wrong. You're lying. Now let me answer. Now, if you keep quiet, I can tell you what the fact is. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, please understand your government between 2008 to 14 gave away loans as if it was distributing mithai under Sonia Gandhi's instructions, and Raghuram Rajan himself has come out and said that was the cause of this NPA problem. First of all, the rate of loans defaulting and becoming fraudulent was 1.32% of the PSB loans given. Today it is 0.05%. This is the reality. Of the massive amount of loans you gave, 8.6 lakh crore loans have been recovered. You said there have been cuts in Manrega funds. Please get your facts right. 61,000 crores was given in the budget of 2021. When the pandemic hit, 1,11,000 crores was given. It was subsequently increased to 1,11,169 crores. When we have come back to normal period, it is 73,000 crores that was budgeted for, and the revised estimates was 98,000 crores. How has there been a cut in the Manrega budget? Then the Aam Aadmi Party says that the 8 pension scheme commission has been declined. Here is the answer saying, no, that is not true. We are considering the 8 pension commission. They lied about that. They lie about what is a write-off and a waive-off. Maria, you know what is a write-off and what is a waive-off. If it was waived off, how come 8.6 lakh crores rupees loans are being recovered? But that is not the point. The real point today is Akshay Marathe hasn't been able to name 10 schools in which all these people who are coming from private schools are being given admission in. He can't name 5 new hospitals built by them. He can't tell us how many people have been employed. They say 10 lakh employment they would be giving. 3,246 is the number of jobs they've given.
20 seconds.
Please, one last point.
Yeah, okay.
They say free bus sawari. They were supposed to give 11,000 DTC buses. Those buses are less than 4,000. Where is the free sawari being given?
Akshay, you know, when we look at the facts, it has to be in specifics. There is a question that is being asked, respond in specifics. 20 seconds is all I have. Boliye.
You know, when he says that loans have been written off, but we have recovered X amount, it is like saying, "मैं physics में pass हो गया, लेकिन chemistry में fail हो गया." It's okay. I mean, you may have
only
recovered
somebody with your intellectual bankruptcy can come up with that useless example. That makes no sense, Maria. That makes no sense. Please call a CNBC TV 18 expert to answer this.
But some other 8.6 lakh crore I have recovered from somewhere else. It doesn't matter. What about the 10 lakh crore rupees?
All right, Akshay Marathe, Avani Bansal, Shehzad Poonawala, I really appreciate your time. Joining me now is our next newsmaker, Surjit Bhalla, Executive Director for India at the International Monetary Fund. Really appreciate your time, Professor Bhalla. The RBI, in a report published in June, linked the precarious state of state finances to freebies, particularly the power subsidies. And last week, we have seen how the Supreme Court has entered this debate. Has the time come to stop freebies altogether?
Look, I think maybe the time had come a long time ago. Freebies do not have any place in a modern economy like ours and what we aspire to. Recall that I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when AAP came to power again in Delhi, and they brought in free water supply to everybody, as long as you consume less than 274 liters a day. And I had got into that debate. I had written that this was the average consumption for all households. Now, why in the world would you give free power to rich households? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I had said so then, and I say so again today.
Okay. Professor Bhalla, I want to understand from you what, according to you, constitutes good and bad freebies, and what are the economic rationale behind them and fiscal consequences? Or is this debate more political?
First of all, a good freebie is a contradiction in terms, an oxymoron. Now, that doesn't mean that all subsidies are bad. If you have targeted subsidies, that is very good and efficient. Now, let me give you an example of what I think are targeted subsidies. For a very long time, I have been a major critic of both the PDS and the NREGA program, jobs program. Now, recently I wrote an article along with 2 others on saying how the PDS system had really helped India avoid the crisis for the poor. The pandemic, its worst effects were contained by not only providing those food subsidies, but also increasing them. Now, what changed? What changed was that the PDS system back in 2004 was reaching only 25% of the intended beneficiaries. And remember, at that time, everybody could access the PDS system. So that's an example of a very bad, non-targeted subsidy. In 2011, the targeting increased to 50%. Again, very bad. Now, starting in 2014, with the new law, and regardless of whether one agrees with the food security law or not, and we can discuss that, the targeting nevertheless increased in efficiency to something like 80 to 90%. Now we should debate, okay, so we've got the administrative setup to provide food to the needy. Now, the interesting debate now is, now that the crisis is over, should you provide food subsidies as via the PDS system, which involves a lot of inefficiencies, or should you just provide, rather than to 75% of the population, which is what the PDS system or the food security law does, provide to the bottom 30%. You can double the amount of money that the poor and still come out ahead. So in other words, I can quite understand when supply constraints are there, you're not allowed to walk in the streets and so on and so forth, to provide food to the needy. But it is a bit of a stretch to think that 75% of the population are in need of food subsidies.
Okay.
And that 100% of the population, at least in Delhi, is in need of water, free water, not to mention free electricity and other such freebies that abound in the Indian landscape.
Okay, then Professor Bhalla, how do you look at this argument that Prime Minister Kisan Yojana, which gives rupees 1,000 a year to every farmer, is no different from Aam Aadmi Party's electricity subsidy to the poor?
Very good question. Look, the 6,000 rupees subsidy or income transfers, first of all, it is a more efficient form of subsidy than the going through the food subsidy, in-kind subsidies. That's the first point. Second point, should all farmers be getting that income transfer? No. Again, I think that started back in 2019. Perhaps every government tries out things on an experimental basis. I think we now have reached a stage where the bureaucracy is very efficient in targeting subsidies. We saw that with the food subsidies that we just talked about. So I think we now should look at income transfers to the poor, and the poor are no longer defined to be the 5% of the population, which the Food Security Act defined it as that. But I would think somewhere around 25%, a quarter of the population, and we do give them, whether they be farmers or non-farmers, we provide targeted income transfers to them. That is the way to go. So remember, what you want to do is to provide support to the bottom 25 and maybe the bottom third of the population.
Okay.
That's a political decision, but I don't think there is any reason for it to be more than a third. Then you decide on how much income support they need. Not in kind, just straight cash transfers. And that's a political decision, I agree. But the method of doing it is via income transfers, not via in-kind subsidies.
Okay, then PDS and NREGA schemes, are these welfare schemes or not, according to you?
Well, let's look at the PDS system in a historical context, which has stayed the same, or the operation of that. The idea was back in the 1970s that we should provide food to the poor. And at that time, remember, the poor population was much, much larger than now. Yes. And it made a lot of sense to provide support to the poor. I have always been completely in favor of such a policy. So we decided, excuse me, to provide food to the poor. But we said, okay, now how do we provide food to the poor? We will buy the food from the farmers. Okay, we'll buy the food from the farmers. Now, the farmers need a fertilizer. So we provide them with fertilizers. And then we will provide them with free electricity, and all to provide food to the poor. Now, what happened? In 1985, Rajiv Gandhi correctly said that only 15% of these food subsidies reached the poor. And I think he was being optimistic. So why not, listen, we identify the poor and we provide them with cash. We provide them with income. Now, I would think that even at that time, targeting by this method was much better than targeting by the method that we adopted. NREGA, again, for a long time, NREGA wasn't constructing any useful infrastructure.
Okay.
Now, if we can have NREGA construct useful infrastructure, and I think we now have mechanisms in place to do that, then think of it as an employment program where people are hired to construct infrastructure, which is what I think is happening now. But there are reporters like you should go out and see whether infrastructure is indeed being constructed, how efficient is the NREGA program. There's too much tendency in India throughout history.
Yes.
Oh, this is for the poor, so let's do it. Well, I think, in this day and age, that argument is neither necessary nor sufficient. You must provide income for the poor. Absolutely. But at least make it efficient and not broadly in kind unless there is a real emergency like we had in the pandemic.
All right. Professor Bhalla, last question to you. There is this argument also that though growth lifted a large part of the population out of poverty, many in India still have a very hard life with limited opportunity. Will they not be impacted if this freebie is stopped, and particularly in the absence of a social security system and limited employment opportunities?
Mara, you are assuming that the freebies, and all my discussion of the last 10 minutes or so, you're assuming that freebies just reach the poor. That is an assertion which is not grounded in facts. So please think of it that, look, you want to help the poor, absolutely a good idea. Please tell me, how is a freebie like free electricity in Punjab helping the poor?
Yes.
Does that help the poor? So it helps the poor farmer, but it helps the rich farmer a lot more. He's got a larger land. He's using more electricity for irrigation. So please, a freebie is wrong politically, economically, etc. Targeted expenditure is politically a better thing to do and economically a better thing to do. So, I think it's an open and shut case. There is an efficient way of redistributing income, which is, after all, what the whole discussion is about. And there is a very inefficient way of redistributing income. So we have chosen, until recently, the most inefficient way of redistributing income. Think about it. Why did no other poor country provide the massive subsidies, food subsidies via the through programs like the PDFs? There are 190 countries in the world. What is so unique, and what is it that we know more than all the 189 other countries? Everybody provides income for the bottom 25%. Income support. You have to do that. Societies have to do that. But there are methods by which you do. Efficient methods by which everybody is better off. So that's the key point, is to do it efficiently and to provide more income to the poor than with the alternative case of in-kind subsidies or freebies, as you call them.
Yes, Professor Bhalla, that exactly is the need of the hour, to have a constructive discussion and debate on this issue. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching.